Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here. My name is Jill. I'll help facilitate our session today. We will be talking with Jessica about how to obtain experience when you're still an undergraduate. Jessica comes to us with over 7 years of higher education experience working with students and institutions across the country. Currently, she serves as a career counselor at the University of Northern Colorado, right here. In this role, Jessica provides career coaching and supports students on their career journey. She holds an MA in college student development and a BS in sociology with a concentration in criminology. A lot of big words there. Oh, sorry, criminology, defiance, and law from Appalachian State University. This education continues to benefit her practice and influence how she supports students and their entry into their desired careers. Let's get Jessica.
Cool beans, thank you. So, hey Fabiola, it's not letting me click. Okay. So what we're going to be talking about today is kind of like what counts as experience, where to begin, and how to tailor that experience for when you are graduating. I would love for this to be really conversational. So if y'all want to prepare to like answer some questions, that'd be really awesome. As you can see, Kelly is not here with me today. She could not make it, but we thought it'd be fun to share some of like our undergraduate experience and how that led to us getting where we are today. So when I was an undergrad, I was in a leadership fellowship. I had multiple housing and residence life jobs. I was taking experiential learning coursework. I worked with alternative service experiences, international affairs organization, and I studied abroad. And I've studied abroad in 7 countries. So I want to start with asking you all what counts as experience for wanting to go into behavioral health? Jobs.
For me, it was lived experience.
Lived experience. Yeah. What else can count as an undergrad?
Volunteer work.
Volunteer work.
Leadership roles at clubs.
Leadership roles in clubs. Internships.
Research opportunities.
Research opportunities, absolutely.
Conferences like this.
Conferences like this, absolutely.
Study abroad.
Study abroad. Anything else? So the real question is like, what doesn't count? Because truly everything can count, everything you can tailor, and everything is giving you those experiences, including those lived experiences that let you go where you want to go. So this can be volunteering. This can be on campus, off campus, through student groups. This can be through familial connections. This can be truly through anything. Clubs and organizations on campus, whether those are directly related to behavioral health or even indirectly related. Projects that you're working on in the classroom, coursework that's applicable. Serving on committees, and that could be committees like a conference like this. This can be committees as you're serving as a student with like student government or with different departments. Work experience, and that is truly not just that directly related experience. I think the number one thing I hear from undergrad students is, I don't know how my fast food experience relates. I don't know how my retail experience relates. Those are 2 very, very important things where you're learning skills. You're learning those interpersonal skills, how to work with people, and that's going to be directly related into the behavioral health field. There's also family management and internships and practicums. So a lot of what y'all said, but what we really wanted to focus with this is literally everything counts. Experience is experience. It doesn't have to be directly related. It can have those transferable skills. So for some of you, I know some of you are not currently an undergrad. So I want to ask, where did your journey begin? And I want to hear from some of y'all of like, how did you begin to get those experiences? Or if you are an undergrad student, what did you start in like your first or second year?
Well, I already graduated, but for me, it began with initially research,
Mhm.
joining the research team and going design my own research project. You do that within the college as well as without. And then work experience, that was a big next step within the mental health specifically. Internships as well. All of that sort of contributed to where I went after I graduated. And then after graduating, getting more experience. But on top of that, you can also get certifications while you're an undergraduate, such as UPass and UCAT. All of that sort of contributes. That's what I did personally.
Awesome, thank you for sharing.
I think my first thing that got me involved on campus was I joined the TRIO program. And I was assigned a TRIO advisor, and that person was really a huge advocate for me for talking to different people, for getting involved with different groups. They were the ones who told me, hey, it sounds like you'd be really interested in XYZ club or XYZ volunteer experience. So having a mentor who knew what I was interested in.
Absolutely. Awesome. Really tying into that community building piece.
Anyone else? I mean, I'm not on behavioral health, I do career services. But mine started basically with kind of the same story of I saw a need and I saw people not getting treated fairly. And I went into HR, still couldn't help enough, but then I got into career services where I had more hands-on and helping students kind of describe and entertain this process.
Awesome. Any other thoughts?
I also think we just, as incoming undergrads, there's often advice during those orientation pieces. Like when I was starting in undergrad, they said, go to 3 club meetings during the first week that they meet and pick one that you're going to commit to, but at least try out 3, and maybe you want all 3, maybe you only like one.
I love that you share that too, because like hearing from all of you, right? Like no one's journey is the same, but it's sometimes starting those experiences early, starting that beginning early, so that way you're learning what you like, but also like what you're not necessarily interested in, because I think that's just as valuable. And so really think about like when you're starting, thinking about those past experiences, doing some online research, talking to friends and peers, especially as a first year student, talking to juniors, seniors who have been in different clubs, different organizations, and hearing their experience as well as school resources. So in career, right, like we serve students who sometimes don't know at all what they want to do, and that's a resource that's available at every college campus. So from start to finish, that finishes as you're starting to really look into what you're wanting to go into, brainstorming those ideas, making a list, setting those goals, so that way, okay, I'm a first year student, I'm going to go to those 3 club meetings. I'm going to set these benchmarking things for myself to get those experiences so I can learn, here's what I really want to do, here's maybe what I don't, and that's going to help lead you down that path for getting that experience for either a master's program, going directly into the field, things like that. And then as well as like tracking. So I think a big thing I see with students is they have all these experiences, they don't know how to kind of talk about it, put it on their resume, talk about it in interviews. And so I always say, as you're going through those experiences, have a journal, have a Word doc, have something where you're writing down stuff, so that way when you are doing that resume, when you are doing that interview, you have a list of things you can pull from that are like, oh yeah, I served on this committee, or oh yes, I did this research project. All of those things can kind of go in for you. So that way you're prepared when you are making those materials and doing those interviews. A third thing I really want to ask is, how do you tailor materials? And I know we have a career person in the audience, so I may pick on you. But for people, like when you're thinking about your resume, your cover letter, those interviews, like how do you tailor your experience to the positions you're applying for? And I know I just got yellow cards. If I need to repeat that for people in the back, please let me know. How do you tailor your experiences when you are doing the resume, the cover letter, preparing for interviews? Like, how do you take those experiences you've had for that job that you're wanting?
When I was applying, during undergrad and after, a big part of it is recognizing the specific responsibilities of the role and the position you're applying for. A lot of the times, there's ways you can do that before you apply. A big part of that is going to the website, reading about the company's mission statement, reading about what your role would be. You know, if you're going to be a research assistant, read about the research project, you know, what they're looking into, all that sort of stuff. So it's really important to understand the actual responsibilities of the role you're going into. And then once you have a clear understanding, you can sort of pick and choose your past experience and apply that to the specific thing. And it doesn't always have to be, like you said, behavioral health experience solely. Like if it's a role where you're going to be interacting with people, you can use previous things like retail, anything where you need customer service experience, because that applies when you're going to talk to people. So it's just figuring out what you're going to be doing in that role and then picking what you think.
Wonderful. Any other thoughts?
I think very, very similarly, when you're reading through the job description, if it says 80% of your job is going to be this thing, you gotta talk about that thing in your resume or on the interview. So whatever that thing that's highlighted the most that they're most looking for is that's happening most often, those should be your first bullet points and your major conversation points.
I also think that just kind of breaking it down even further. So I work with a lot of students in community college setting that they don't have any experience. And so they have to describe that in a way that they can get that first job. So highlighting those types of keywords on a job description, like organized, and reflecting on your own self of, okay, well, how have I am organized. How am I organized? How do I display that skill set? And it could be as easy as developing a filing system or your own budget system kind of thing, right? And any of those experiences are applicable, like the food services to behavioral health. There are some terrible situations that come up in food services at times, and you have to work through that as a part of your job. That is a perfect example of what to bring up in a resume or in a cover letter or interview. So it just is really breaking it down into, like, let's start first with this keyword of organized, or let's start first with this keyword, and then kind of building upon that.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts before I move the slide?
I have two.
Yes.
So for years, I got to be a hiring manager and participate in a variety of different interview panels. You'd be amazed at how many people are experienced, 10 years of experience, 20 years of experience, and they don't update their cover letters. So it says, I want to work for this company in this role, but they're applying to that company for that role. So your cover letter is a gift. It's sometimes intimidating to write, but it is your bridge from your experience to your resume. If you write a really solid cover letter, you're gonna catch somebody's attention, and then they're gonna look at your resume. If you forego the cover letter, you lower your chances of them looking at your resume, and you miss the opportunity to create the bridge from your experience to all of your training and everything that's on paper. So don't miss that opportunity, but also make sure you update it every single time for whatever job you're applying
And I think that brings up a really good point, and I say this a lot, is you never want to and like think that people are going to infer your transferable experience. You want to connect the dots for them. You want to explain it for them because they may see something like food service, like retail, and if you're not connecting those dots for them, they're going to be like, well, you don't have that direct experience. When in all reality, you have those direct skills, that direct customer service, that direct people experience, that's gonna give you the real foundation for those jobs. And so we really talk about like defining your experiences as it relates to your area of study. So as you're writing those bulleted statements, as you're writing that cover letter, making sure that you're defining it in a way that directly relates. Similarly with tangible skills. So these are those hard and soft skills. I call them tangible because soft are just as valid as those hard technical skills. And so making sure that you're, again, relating those to that area and to that job you want. If you're going into behavioral health, right, those interpersonal skills, it's those people skills, you want to make sure that when you're writing your resume bullets, you're talking directly about those. Figuring out those action words, which some of y'all said earlier, is what is the job description telling me? And what of those words are those keywords that I need to include in my materials? That one shows the company that you're doing that research, but it also allows you to really put into words like that direct correlation that I was talking about of here's how this is directly related to this job, to this graduate program. So that way you're connecting those dots for that person and they're able to see that without just glimpsing over it. And so with that, it's kind of like, instead of saying helped customers, assisted customers in ordering, preparation, and delivery of services in a timely manner. You want those well-rounded bullets. You want the experience that's going to really show the person reading your resume what it was that you did in the position, but also, again, using some of those keywords for how it relates. You may have answered phones. Instead of just putting that as a bullet, it's provided efficient and effective communication to meet the needs of customers. Again, right, in behavioral health, it's putting that customer first. It's putting that focus on their needs and how you're going to help meet those needs together. Played on a sports team. This is when I get a lot. I get a lot of athletes who don't put that they were on a team sport on their resume at all because they don't think it's that relatable experience. But when you're on a sports team, you collaborate with teammates to successfully communicate and reach team goals. It's going to be a little more specific when it's your own resume, but making sure that you're pulling in all those different experiences because that's what makes you, one, stand out as a candidate when you have that variety, but two, it's showing that recruiter, that employer, kind of who you are and what all you're bringing to the table. There's some additional resources that these are not specific to a school. These are run by either government industries or outside companies. And I'm not going to go through these today, but this is something I would encourage, especially undergraduate or high school students entering into college, to play around with. So the first one is, what can I do with this major? This is where you can search for a major. You go into it. It shows you all the different areas that are traditionally aligned with that major. Obviously, most majors, you can kind of go into any field with it. This helps give some of that direction. And it also provides in those areas, such as healthcare, such as business, such as all those things, direct employers that you can start looking into. And it gives you tips for how to enter into those fields. This is really good for, one, like can be helpful for deciding a major. Like, let's say you know what you want to do, but you don't know what you want to major in. This can help with that. On the flip side, it also helps with, I have this major, I'm not sure what I want to do. Here's the things that I can start exploring to really look into that on my own. The second one is the Occupational Outlook Handbook. This is also by the US Bureau of Labor. And so this is one where you can look up positions. It gives you those tasks, it gives you pay, it gives you kind of more of information in the day-to-day of those jobs to where you can look into it without having to go and shadow. It helps you narrow it down so you can then go on to talk in people of those positions about informational interviewing, about shadowing opportunities, about internships. And again, it's about like narrowing that down so you kind of know, where do you want to get some of that experiential learning? The next one is Own It Online. This is similar. It's run by the Department of Labor. It is one where you can search. You can search by interests, values, all of these other things that we kind of sometimes forget about when we're just searching for job titles. It also lets you go into different titles of jobs and learn about, here's the task, here's the skills, here's some of that day to day. You can search by pay, by state. I love this also for tailoring a resume. We talk about this a lot with exploration, but you can go into the skills section of this site and it'll say, here's all the skills associated with the job you want. Those are all keywords that you can use in your materials, such as your resume and your cover letter, to really brainstorm how those pieces where you're like, I don't know how this connects, helps you brainstorm for how that really does and helps you put that into those bulleted statements or that cover letter. So I want to leave a lot of time for any kind of questions. I know we have a lot of people like in the chat who can post questions and Fabiola can tell me those, but also if there's anyone here who would like to ask questions as well.
What's the biggest question that you get, that you see most frequently when people first walk in your door and say, help, where do I start?
I think especially when they're looking for experiences, it's like, I don't even know where to look. And so it's going through some of the pieces I just went through, but it's also thinking about, okay, like, what is the experience you want and how is that going to help you in your kind of journey onto your career? I think the second one I get is like, how do I write a resume? Because it's something that you're not typically taught in high school. You're not taught growing up. And so I get students who are coming year 1 through year 4 to our alumni as well of like, I've never had to do this. Where do I even start? And so it's kind of talking about like what I did today about like, you want to always start with the mindset of like, here's the job I want, and always tailor your materials. And like you said earlier, it's editing those for every job you're applying for. If you're applying to very similar jobs, you may not have as much editing, but especially if I see students who are like, well, I'm interested in these 3 areas. They're going to have 3 very different resumes for those areas that they're adapting. They're also going to have 3 very different cover letters. And they're going to be updating those for each job. I think we fall into this like fallacy of like, I just have 1 resume, 1 cover letter, I'm good to go. But really employers are looking for, how did you research our company? How are you tailoring it? And like, really, what are you bringing that we need? But also kind of like, how do our wants match up?
Can you talk a little bit about why the future employers might care about club activity or study abroad, things that aren't as directly related as we see in jobs and internships?
Yeah. So thinking about, I'll start with study abroad. Study abroad is something where like you get a different perspective. And so like I can share because I studied abroad. I study abroad in undergrad and in my graduate program. And so I'll go off of my graduate program. I was in college student development. My study abroad opportunity was to visit 6 different universities and colleges in the UK and learn about their systems and learn about how they're interacting with students and how that compares with American higher education. That is something that like sets me apart from other candidates. It shows that I have that different perspective. It shows that I have this international knowledge, as well as that ability to collaborate with people from different institutions. And so that's something like I typically will always include as part of my bottom section of my cover letter, because that's something that can help me stand out as a candidate. Thinking about study abroad in different programs in different countries, and thinking about, especially if the company you're applying to has an international presence, all those skills you learned by being in a different culture in a different place is going to be directly tied into what that company is wanting to do. Same thing, even if it's not an international company, it really is, you have that collaboration, those people interaction skills, and that ability to kind of like be out of your comfort zone. That's going to directly apply to the work you're going to be doing. For clubs and orgs, it's that collaboration, it's that interpersonal skills, as well as a lot of clubs and orgs are going to be directly related to the field that you want to go into. So if you are going to behavioral health, there are many clubs and orgs on college campuses that are directly connected to that. And so as you're talking about those experiences, getting leadership in those experiences, That's going to be super, super important. I think I skipped. Okay, there's a slide that went missing. So I did do a potential timeline. And so thinking about clubs and orgs made me think of that. In your first year, it's starting to do that exploration, joining some of those different clubs, seeing what's out there. And then as you continue through your college education, it is, how do I get leadership responsibilities or leadership roles and get some of that initiative and that ability to kind of manage? That's going to be directly related. Same thing in like off-campus employment or on-campus employment. How are you getting training opportunities to where you're the one who's training those new employees? Those are all going to be pieces where you're building year 1 to 4 plus in order for you really to get those skills that are going to be directly like applicable, but also what managers are wanting. They want someone coming in who knows how to train, who knows how to collaborate, who knows how to do all those things. And that's how I would answer your question. Other questions?
How early should students start looking for internships, given the process for credit or not credit?
Yes. So I think for credit, it kind of depends on the requirements for it. Depends on like the year and like the course associated with it. For non-credit, you can start as early as you want. And I always suggest like people do, because it does give you that direct visual and like experience into the field where like, no matter how much research you do online, no matter how much you learn in class, you're never going to get that direct contact like you can in an internship or an employment opportunity. So I say start as soon as you can. Usually like, I feel like first year is like, let's explore, let's see what's out there. Year 2 is where I say start really looking. Year 3 is typically where like, if it is required for your graduation for your program, they typically require that for that 3rd year. So that way your 4th year is you can either build, have employment, etc. So that way you're ready to go after you graduate. You're kind of like ready to launch. I also like to share, you can do more than one internship. I think a lot of times students are like one and done, when really like having a variety is like, especially paid. I always suggest go for the paid internships because you deserve to be paid for your work if possible. But it really allows you to figure out not just like the field that you want to go into, but the type of place you want to work. Do you want a job where you're more in a cubicle and you do that individual work? Do you want where you're more a part of a team and you're doing collaborative work a lot? Do you want people facing? Do you want non-people facing? Like those are all things I think we forget to talk about and forget to think about until we enter the world. And those internship practicums and work experiences are all going to teach you that. So when you're searching for that first full-time job, you kind of know what to ask in the interview process. So you can find where it's kind of best for you for that first time employment.
I think that the earlier that you start looking for internships, the more likely you're going to find paid internships. And there's a difference in paid and non-paid internships in the amount of work that you get to work hands-on. So if you have a paid internship, you do get to do that hands-on work versus a non-paid is more of a mentorship type of opportunity. So earlier the better.
Yeah, and that's where I get that question a lot of like, I see a lot of students who are like, it's October and they need one for spring. And so I would say like start earlier, like you said. You also want to think about like finding internship sites you want to apply for before it's even time to apply. And I think about that with the job search too. You don't want to start your job search in April and you're graduating in May. You want to start looking at companies, looking at positions and all of that much further in advance. So you're ready to go. Your materials are ready to go when you are actually submitting those applications. Other questions?
Lauren from online, they're wondering, they're a senior undergraduate for spring, and they've had an incredible time finding internships. They're being told no, that everyone says no, that won't allow someone who's been already working in the master's.
So I just want to make sure I heard it right. They're having a hard time finding internships because HIPAA, because places are wanting people in their masters.
Or at least that's what they're doing.
Yeah. So I think like that is a piece of it. A lot of behavioral health internships are going to be focused at those master's candidates because of the training they're getting in that master's program. There are definitely opportunities. It's just going to be trying to define those. And so something I would suggest is either visiting like a career center on campus, seeing any mentors you have. Faculty are also a really good resource for finding internships because they've been doing this for a while and they've connected students with internships before. I think another thing I would try is doing some informational interviews. And so rather than just directly applying to these, reaching out to some of these companies or sites that you're interested in and being like, hey, I'd love to learn more about what you do. And in that conversation, asking, are there like internships available for these? And they may not have any, but they may know people who do have internship opportunities available for undergraduate students. It's one of those where you gotta like think about, here's like the visible job market, here is the invisible job market. And that goes for internships just like jobs. And so thinking about how can I use connections? And like I said, faculty is gonna be a really good resource for that because they're working with undergraduate students, especially if you're in that program, they're gonna have resources that they can connect you with and hopefully find you an internship or a practicum site.
In the other session, Mary what's her name? She mentioned that there is a list on the state site of places that post internships. And there might be a differential on undergrad versus grad, but there was a site that you can kind of start with and then research more. So, yeah, the last session.
Any other questions?
I'll give you another. When people are applying for jobs, how much of the job criteria do they need to meet in order to apply?
That's a really good question. So I say, so you'll always see like on job positions, required and preferred. The required are like those standard that you need to meet, but there's also some wiggle room in that a lot of people don't realize. So let's say it's bachelor's in science, medical, or related field. That related field is going to be key. It doesn't have to be that science. It doesn't have to be that medical. It's what's related, and that's going to be in how you're talking about that in those application materials. So let's say it requires 3 years of customer service in a clinical setting. Let's say you don't have that clinical setting. Do you have experiences that are directly transferable? And it's going to be, again, how you're talking about those. So yes, there's that minimum. There's some wiggle room in there. And I always say, like, it doesn't hurt to apply. The preferred are simply that, they're preferred. And so that's when, if you're honest, like when someone is on a search, they have a rubric typically, they have all their candidates. Those preferred is how they start narrowing down. But you don't have to meet all of those or any of those to even apply. So I really say, like, to sum up that, it's, if there's something you're really interested in and you're like, I think I meet the qualifications, but I'm not sure, go ahead and apply. And in those materials, just make sure you are talking about the transferability and the desire to work for that company. Because some companies will be like, you know, they didn't meet these preferred, but they seem really interested and really invested. They might offer you an interview, even if you aren't meeting all the preferred like the other candidates are. It's really tailoring those materials, doing that research. So like, as a company, what are their values? What is their mission? What is their strategic plan? There's all these different things you can look at to put those into your application materials, and that is going to help you stand out. So like, let's say you maybe don't meet one of the required, but you're showing all of that, they may still offer you that interview just because you're showing that initiative, that research, and that preparation.
How is that impacted by candidate market, aka now?
That's a good question as well. There are more people searching than there are positions really right now. So there's, or sorry, opposite. So thinking about like, they're doing all this hiring, there's all these like candidates. And really like we've seen this shift with COVID of like, and in the past few years prior to, of candidates are starting to be like, here's my worth, here's what I want. And if I'm not going to get it at this job, I can find it at another job. And so, and how that relates to the previous question, I think it's like, if you're seeing something you want and you don't need it, go ahead and apply because it never hurts. And let's say like you don't get that position, it's going to give you that practice, that experience of learning how to like answer some of those questions. That's going to help you in the next position you're interviewing for as well. And also as a career, I don't know if you have any insight into this too. I'd love for you to share as well.
Yeah, so I actually have a background in human resource recruitment, and depending on the size of my pool, it would depend on how flexible I was. And being in career services, there are so many times that I have to coach somebody, apply for the job, just go apply for the job. We get so caught up in this process and writing a resume, cover letter, all of it in this job search process, we kind of beat ourselves up. And we have a hard time thinking that we're qualified for positions. More often than not, if you're looking at that job announcement, there's probably something resonating, and that's probably something to your skill set. You should probably look into applying for it and just make that leap. And if you get the rejection email and it's a company that you really like, reach out to them. Ask them, hey, is there something I can do? I'm really interested at working at this company. I would love some feedback. Sometimes there are companies that provide feedback. There are other things that they're like, well, you kind of applied for the wrong position, but if you apply for this one, you would be a great candidate. HR is always trying to give out free advice. So follow up with calls.
Yeah. And I see that a lot with like students who are graduating, like falling into imposter syndrome. They're like, well, I don't have the direct experience, or I don't have enough experience, or I don't have exactly what they're looking for. It's still okay to apply. And like you said, like ask. Some companies will not give feedback, some will. And so it just depends on that company. But it really is like, don't fall into the like, I'm not good enough. Like really, I encourage people to do this in their job searches. Like think about what you bring to the table, not what you don't have. And that helps that shift. And you're going to feel more confident in writing those materials as well as interviewing and like reaching out to those companies. Like I said earlier, that like visible versus invisible job market, just like you can find internships, a lot of jobs are never posted, and it's by reaching out to these companies. So you don't have to worry about the minimum or preferred. You're reaching out directly and you're able to get interviews in those positions without ever having to really like go into detail and worrying about those minimum and preferred.
Some of my best hires were pulled from different pools that they applied for. And I'm like, actually, I have this other position that your experience is perfect for. Maybe you should consider applying for this one. I've gotten some really good hires out of that.
Any other questions?
Do you have any advice in navigating the Great Resignation?
For like people resigning or for
For this group specifically, and how they can maybe leverage it.
so it's hard because there's a lot of different people in this room.
True.
So I think like thinking about the Great Resignation, like people are leaving, and part of that is a lot of employees are like, I know my worth. And so I think like as people are navigating job searches, it's knowing your worth, not being afraid to negotiate, not being afraid. And that's more than pay. I think a lot of times people just think of negotiation as salary. There's a lot more to it. So that's benefits, that is time, that is remote work. Like remote work is something that like people want, and a lot of employers are giving that. I think in Denver, even pre-COVID, companies were moving to remote work. You had to go in maybe once a week or once a month. More and more companies are like, oh, I don't have to pay for like a building in Denver. That's really nice. They're saving a lot of money. And so a lot of companies are moving to that remote work. So thinking about those things as you're going through this, we're seeing that trend of like, people want that flexibility. They want the option. And so if you're an employer, how are you meeting that need and how are you giving that to your employees and utilizing that as a recruitment technique? Because I know a lot of people, I know a lot of students I meet with, they want the flexibility of it. They may be like, I want to go in sometimes, not all the time. And so thinking about that, again, as that recruiter, as that employer of like, do we need to be in person 100% of the time? And we're seeing, a report just came out last week, where it's like over 20% of postings on Handshake were virtual or partially virtual or remote. And so that's what students are running for. It was searched on Handshake like 17 million times in the past couple years. Like, especially graduating students, they've been doing remote with school. They found they enjoy it and they want to continue that. And so thinking about, as you are going in, like the Great Resignation has created that job searchers market where like there's tons of positions out there. You're going to be able to find something that matches your needs, or you're using that negotiation and that leverage of like, hey, everyone's leaving. Here's what we want. Here's what I want in that negotiation. And so that way you are actually utilizing that. I think like when you're looking in a job search, like paying attention to those trends is really important because that's going to be your leverage. Like, what is the employee turnover at the institution or at the employer? Learning those things is going to help you kind of get those negotiation pieces to where you're finding that kind of like fit of like what is meeting your needs. And I mean that as like your needs, not in the environment. But again, it's for the employers, it's paying attention to that. Because if you're not getting the candidates, some of those reasons are why. And so like, it could be even asking employees who are turning down positions that you're offering, what would have had you come? Like asking those questions, asking those follow-up HR surveys can be important. So you can kind of shift, if you're able, what you're doing in order to meet the candidate's needs. Because like you said, it is that job searchers market. And so like there needs to be that shift in the employer and that empowerment for our students who are also going into that market.
I think about the behavioral health side of it. So actually some of the job announcements that I've been looking at recently have said, they have like a little statement, and I think like City of Fort Collins also has it too, that says women, statistically speaking, women are less likely to apply for positions because they don't meet all of the minimum and preferred qualifications. So that confidence is really key here. And just knowing that that is a statistic that we are battling. And on the employer side, we want you to apply for that position. And we would like to be the ones who determine whether or not you meet that minimum qualification or if we can be that flexible.
Yeah, and I just saw a position with that recently that was like, if you think you don't qualify, still apply.
Right.
And so like putting those in your statements, you're gonna get really high quality candidates who from underrepresented identities may feel like they can't or don't meet those qualifications. And that's like statistically has been a piece of work and career. So including statements like that will expand your pool and you get you a more diverse experiences within the people who are applying. And I know, Laura, you had one question.
Yes. So as a non-traditional student, undergrad, I'm looking at going into a field that I have no experience in. My experience is completely different from that. So what's the best way to market that?
So I think it's that transferability. So like you said, it's totally unrelated, but are those skills that do directly correlate? And that's where like doing some research, visiting the career center, like those are going to be things where like we can facilitate those conversations to be like, okay, here's like, let's think about how these connect. If it's something where like, I guess like, what are you wanting to go into? that'll help me answer this.
Well, I'm wanting to go into behavioral health.
Okay.
So that's,
Is there a specific area in it?
I'd like to work with youth.
Youth and behavioral health. And then what's your previous experience though?
My previous experience is in accounting and office management.
Okay. So I think of like, when I think of accounting and office management, there's a lot of like people interactions, collaborations, paperwork with that. Those are all things that are going to directly go into working with you. And so thinking about like when people are under 18, there's a lot of red tape policies that are put in place that even though you don't know specifically those, you have the knowledge and skills of being able to learn those quickly in your previous role that are going to directly relate. So you have the knowledge and skill of being able to learn those and being able to input those. And I know we're at time, but that's like one quick example of that. I think like it may seem like it doesn't, but like to me, there's so many relatable skills in that, and it's just how you're going to be marketing that. And like I said, like I'd be very willing to talk with you through that too.
Thank you for your time today and leading us through this conversation. Thank you all for participating. We'll break now and the next session will start in about 15 minutes.